I'm sorry. I wish everyone in Occidental all the best, but I'm just telling you, Occidental, in my opinion, it's garbage. Warren Buffett, in my opinion, made the situation worse coming in with this whole Anadarko acquisition and getting his pref dividend during these horrible times when they've had to cut dividends on common shareholders. I'm just saying, Occidental may go BK. And when it does, one of my premium oil companies like Chevron will pick the thing up again at pennies on the dollar. I'm not trying to insult anyone who's in Occidental. My heart and prayers go out. I hope anyone in that company, it turns around and it does better. But I'm just saying, this stuff bothers me because I see it every day on Twitter, on the internet. People saying, oh, dividend investing, it doesn't work because Occidental cut the dividend. Boeing had problems long before this situation. I did a video. I told you guys, I don't want to buy Boeing. I don't invest in Boeing. I wish everyone in Boeing all the best. I think Boeing has to survive. I think if a company does get bailed out, that's one of the ones that probably should, because I don't want goals as a common shareholder, so I avoided it. Occidental Petroleum, I did a video, I warned everyone, I avoided it because I felt, again, that Berkshire's investment in the company in acquiring Anadarko and the type of preferred shares that they got, I just felt that their interests weren't aligned with, like I said, it was easy for me to avoid KHC. It was easy for me to avoid Occidental. It was divine intervention that I avoided Dominion because it looked just fine to me when I analyzed it. A number of
Morning, the energy sector, big oil and gas names like Cabot, Occidental, Exxon among the worst performers in that particular group. And shares of Technip FMC down more than 5% ahead of its removal from the S&P later this week due to its spinoff of Technip Energies. Morgan, back to you.
Josh Lipton, thank you. Well, Elon Musk again making headlines this morning.
From crude, we speak to the CEO of Occidental about the big change for big oil. This is Bloomberg Green.
The year was a very tough year.
Share prices are down across the entire sector.
Let's be honest, and a very painful year.
Demand is down a little bit.
As some European companies, the former king of shale, Occidental, is trying for a new title, King of Carbon. My colleague Alex Steele explains.
But that number could get a lot bigger. Enter Occidental, one of the leading U.S. producers in the Permian Basin. Now, one of its subsidiaries teamed up with a private equity firm to form 1.5, which in turn is teaming up with Carbon Engineering. 1.5 provides the financing. Oxy provides the knowledge on carbon and injection.
In the Permian Basin, major producer Occidental told customers it would be forced to curtail oil deliveries, while Chevron shut some wells in the region. More than 20 refineries were disrupted by the polar blast, sending gasoline futures surging.
This is a timely reminder for a wake-up call, really, and saying that, yeah, we absolutely need fossil fuel.
You mentioned the venture capital money, and it brings up what Occidental has done, which is basically they get other people to fund their direct air carbon capture investments. And I wonder, who might you think about partnering with to do something similar?
Well, I think, as I said, this is a growing space. If you look at the
racing to, they're buying Chevron. We have Occidental Petroleum up 34% over the last 6 months. That's just the last month. So this is the past 30 days. Look at the past 6 months. It's up 145%. 145. That's how much Occidental Petroleum is up. These
trying to do it differently and reduce their own emissions. The other is really Occidental, that at some point in the next 10 to 15 years, they want to become a carbon capture company where they can get carbon out of air. And so that's what they're going to be doing. Where do you?
Then we had, at least in the US, Occidental Petroleum and then ConocoPhillips followed through. And Chevron and Exxon have been considered holdouts, haven't set that goal yet, but it's clear that they are now talking more and more about carbon, and maybe they are looking to set such a goal eventually.
Basis Marathon, Devon, Hess, and Occidental
all down a little bit. But overall.
All right, let's go ahead and take a look at that new Audi here that was mentioned. So I believe it's this one. Audi's all-electric Q4 e-tron crossover will have a dynamic AR windshield display. This is actually like old, like.
I think he's even making a bunch of money on Occidental Petroleum now, not to mention a fat dividend. Do you go after any of these deals? And if so, how do you spot them?
I would argue the opposite.
Really?
Let me explain. Buffett has $140 billion in cash. He has to spend $30 billion on
just saw that in a micro example. I teach at Occidental College, which is in Eagle Rock. That they want to put a bus lane down Colorado Boulevard, and the local council member, after months of hearings and discussions, doesn't like what's going on. So he's calling for more hearings and more discussions.
Oh, yeah.
Stocks at the top of the board like Devon Energy, Occidental as well. Devon Energy up about 3% here. You've got this day here where you've got crude oil here, WTI crude, well back above that $68 level. And, of course, over there in London, you got Brent crude camped out above 70. These are back at those.
These other stocks, Occidental, ConocoPhillips, Marathon Oil, UBS this morning, upgrading Marathon Oil to 16 from $11. UBS this morning, upgrading Marathon Oil to 16 from $11 a share, Tom.
Taylor, thanks so much. Greatly appreciated. It is July 1, and we need to look forward as we look back as well. We start strong with Liz Ann Saunders of
some other players as well, because you have the likes of Conoco and Occidental who have announced a pathway to net zero. How do their plans compare to the rest?
That's right, they have. Now, they've couched these plans in terms like ambition and goal, but they have both declared sort of a pathway to net zero. In Conoco's case, by mid-century, Occidental has been slightly more ambitious, including Scope 3. That means the customer emissions in that many decades into the future. And Occidental is building a direct air carbon capture plant in the Permian, which it sees as a real test case for how it's going to deal with its carbon emissions going forward.
On oil down about 4%, as is Occidental Petroleum, and even Apache down the better part of 3%, Danny.
Kaylee, I want to stick in the U.S. because after Friday's job report, the question is, what are the next catalysts that move the market? And certainly inflation is going to be in focus with.
He has made some convertible deals with some companies. Occidental Petroleum was one of the last deals. So he's always doing something, but the mammoth thing is missing. And if you look at the long term, when he bought Burlington Northern Santa Fe, his cash pile went down to $25 billion, which is just the minimum for, let's say, insurance purposes. And that's later swelled.
A lift in some oil equities in early hours. Marathon Oil, Occidental Petroleum, each up a little more than 1.5%. Two movers to the downside, though, to note. One is Open Door Technologies. It priced an related equities higher in pre-market trading as well. Occidental Petroleum is benefiting from the rebound in oil, and also news we got overnight that it has repaid $1.3 billion in debt over the last 2 months. That stock is up 2.5%. And then you have some stocks tied to materials and metals with the rebound in metals prices like Freeport-McMoRan and Alcoa, and energy names like Diamondback and Occidental Petroleum. All of them are higher in the range of 2 to 2.5% this morning, Matt.
All right, good to get the morning movers there. I want to show you something that isn't really moving very much. This chart, and I'll welcome our Bloomberg radio listeners, because
stocks on their buy list include Occidental, Chevron, and Hess. So, guys, a lot of names here to watch. Back to you.
All right, Pippa, thank you. Lindsay, your thoughts on energy and specifically the stocks? I mean, it's not just crude, right? It's also natural gas, which is what I think 573 last I checked right now, which is just an incredible move there. I mean,
back above 75. So the two stocks leading the S&P 500 are Occidental and Marathon. They're each up about 6%.
That's it. I'll pull off that here. Yeah, so I'm just looking at the historic volatility of Apple too. Apple right now sitting at about 20 on historic volatility, 20 to 22. Apple has gone as low, and it's interesting because
Will do come the opening bell, and a number of names moving to the upside. Occidental Petroleum, Continental Resources, Marathon Oil, all up in the tune of 2 to 2.7%, Francine.
We're seeing underneath the surface because you hit it so well. All of those energy
points. Financials, the third best performing sector. Occidental, still the best performing stock within the S&P. And it's not just energy. Natural gas prices here in the U.S. continue to push higher.
Petroleum flying, Guy, up 6.8%. BP as well, up 3.6%. That sector is the top sector on the year, up 35%. And the interesting thing is it's not up as much as oil. So some are saying that the top sector on the year could be still a catch-up trade.
Well, Kaylee, on my end here, I have broken out the models and specific
stocks in the S&P that are really green: Williams, Occidental, EOG, all of the shale players. 10-year yield, though, interesting here. The yield's up still by 2 basis points. It was up 4. We paired some of that, but you're still not seeing the safety kind of bid within the 10-year market that you would have thought. It now becomes a question of, do you buy the dip? What happens into the close? Will retail
Stocks are outperforming in pre-market trading. The likes of Devon and Occidental each higher by about 1.5%. And then you also have Bitcoin gaining today. It's back above $55,000 at its highest level since May. And so some crypto-related equities also getting a lift in early hours. Bit Digital, Riot Blockchain up 4 and 2.6% respectively. Danny.
Its best level in more than 7 years. Occidental Petroleum also higher. And then it's also about the metals, as Alex was just talking about 10-15 minutes ago.
There, as we see oil north of $81 a barrel on WTI. Just one example of that is Occidental Petroleum. Those shares up the better part of 3% before the bell, Francine.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible, actually, this energy crunch really giving a lift to a lot of these oil producers. I was also reminded of Goldman Sachs call WTI at $90 a barrel by.
Companies in particular moving to the upside: Occidental, Apache, Devon Energy, all higher to the tune of about 2.25% to 3%, Francine, which of course is a material stock, Francine.
Yeah, we'll have.
As a result, the likes of Apache is up 2.5% and Occidental Petroleum up about 1.7%, Matt.
You know what I think is really interesting, Kaylee? It's not all about, with copper, it's not all about the spot price or the 3-month price, but more about the spread. And I think the same is true with bond prices. Yesterday felt like a real sea change because we had
So talking about direct air capture, this is what I find so interesting about Occidental, because they've been really into carbon capture for a long time, and they're going heavy into direct air capture. And I asked the CEO a while ago, like, what company are you going to be in 10 to 15 years? And she was saying that they're not going to really think of themselves as an oil company.
And the rest of it as well. After Anadarko, after Occidental Petroleum, what's going to be the synergy that we're going to see in American oil? What's the next combination that just has to be done?
Well, I think you're seeing those combinations already, Tom. So I think there's a lot of consolidation around shale assets in the U.S.
for millions of years. We're the launch partner with Occidental and 1.5 on a project that'll be the largest carbon capture facility in the world. The key on this, though, is we're investing in it and they're investing in it to drive the cost down. And it's been great being here at COP, because when I talk about carbon sequestration, not a lot of people
crisis that we're experiencing. Vicki Hollub is the CEO of Occidental, and she was talking at ADIPEC also, and she said, and I'm quoting here, "If I was to make a call, I'd make a local call first. I wouldn't make a long-distance call." Why can't President Biden make a short-distance call?
Well, he absolutely can. In fact, it's
crisis that we're experiencing. Vicki Hollub is the CEO of Occidental, and she was talking at ADIPEC also, and she said, and I'm quoting here, "If I was to make a call, I'd make a local call first. I wouldn't make a long-distance call." Why can't President Biden make a short-distance call?
Well, he absolutely can. In fact, it's even shorter distance. It's a
pre-market trading here in the U.S. The likes of Occidental and Devon, some of the biggest underperformers in pre-market trading, down around 4% each. You're also seeing a lot of the travel complex under pressure. Just one example is Carnival Cruise Lines, down 3.4%. And then you were both referring to the Moderna story. Its booster shot looks like it increased.
Bank of America and the big industrial names, the energy names, Occidental, both of those did well yesterday. Bank of America up again pre-market 0.3%. Occidental, after its 7% rally, is taking a bit of a breather this morning, 0.5%. So as I say, this rotation largely driven by yields. But what's driving the yields in turn? For our radio listening audience, I've just put a chart up in front of me of the 2s, 10s yield curve, a very simple chart of just that.
Down the better part of 7 percentage points, and then energy players like Occidental Petroleum down about 1.7% at this point, Tom.
Kaylee, that call from strategists that Europe and European stocks are going to do well this year because of that tilt to values and cyclicals, that is being challenged right now with these losses of 1.3% across the benchmark here in Europe. I want to focus.
Member of your investment club.
Thank you.
Tell me about Occidental Petroleum, OXY.
It's the only oil stock that I don't like here. Let's go to Joe in New Jersey. Joe.
Hey, Jim. I wanted to ask your opinion about Q Health, HLTH.
It did, however, sell its shares in Occidental Petroleum, Meredith, and Zymeworks.
Is off by about 6%. Fellow drillers Marathon Oil, Occidental, Diamondback Energy, and Pioneer also moving lower. So what's behind the disconnect, and why aren't energy prices following oil higher? Well, Eric Whiteman from XLM Financial Group pointed to the latest rig count data, which showed U.S. drillers adding the most in 4 years. He said this is prompting
We are involved in Occidental, as you probably know, and we have a lot of that. Oh, and that has got the benefit of this upcycle now. It's sort of amazing, isn't it, that less than I think March, a year ago March, so it's less than a year.
Equities, especially those E&P companies, the likes of Occidental Petroleum, which is higher by the better part of 5%. One big mover to the downside, though, is Yandex. This is a Russian internet company, operates a search engine. Also, there's a taxi component to this as well. But it, of course, is listed here in the U.S. And with these tensions, once again, first and foremost on the agenda, Yandex.
They're making a ton of money. I don't know if you saw Occidental Petroleum. This is one of the big exploration and production companies in the world. They reported the numbers yesterday. It was astonishing. I mean, they just made gobs of money.
E&P shale players here in the U.S., the likes of Occidental Petroleum and Devon Energy, each higher by around 2% or more. And you have the oil majors moving to the upside as well. Chevron up by around 2%, as is ExxonMobil, which has now joined its big oil peers in saying it will exit its Russia business. That includes a 30% stake in the Far East. It's true for stocks tied to oil. Some of the energy players out there, including Occidental Petroleum, it's higher by about 1.3%. You have.
Kaylee, coming up on the programme, we're going to be speaking to Pascal Blanc, the Amundi CIO. Plenty of news to talk to him about when it comes to moves on the markets. Also, lots of geopolitical
carbon capture. We know that Occidental has been trying to build out that capacity. Can you speak to the progress of that?
Yes, I'm so excited that we are on the verge of starting the construction of our direct air capture facility. We'll begin it by the end of this year. The first train that we'll build will pull.
NBC special, The Oil Shock, as he talks with the CEOs of Occidental Petroleum, Pioneer Natural Resources, and Williams Company. That's tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern.
A couple comments from different CEOs. One is Occidental's CEO, Vicky Hullab. This is, by the way, the company that Warren Buffett just took a 10% stake in. And so there's been a lot of retail flow into energy stocks.
Sullivan and featuring the CEOs of Occidental, Pioneer, and Williams Companies. Again, that's
seeing the CEOs talk about the good old how they're not going to increase production. That's just what we want to see. And that makes it really hard for them to grow U.S. oil production. And I mean, there's a reason the CEO of Occidental Petroleum today mentioned that we're not planning on significantly increasing our production because we're just going to take the extra cash we're making now from more expensive oil and we're going to use it to pay our shareholders when the oil market comes down again.
That was comforting.
We had the Occidental CEO on earlier. She said prices can go as high as $150 a barrel. Do you agree with that? How high do you think prices can go?
Well, as you know, in OPEC, we
more than $4.5 billion to buy 91.2 million shares of Occidental Petroleum. Buffett purchased the entire stake in just 1 week. It was a decision Buffett made over the previous weekend after reading the company's earnings call with investors from Friday, February 25th. He exclusively tells CNBC, I read every word of the company the right way, Buffett said, referring to Occidental's president and CEO, Vicki Hollub. We started buying on Monday, and we bought all we could. Buffett called Hollub on her cell phone this past Friday, just 1 minute after the market closed, to tell her of the stake that he'd acquired in the company. He bought the stake as Occidental shares spiked, gaining 45% over the course of the week and 17% on Friday alone. Of course, oil prices rose sharply following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and Occidental accounts for about 1% of the world's oil output. Berkshire was required to disclose its stake once it crossed the 10% ownership mark. Berkshire only bought about 9% of Occidental shares last week, but it had to disclose the position because it also owns Warren. Has exited what was once roughly a 10% stake in Occidental. His 2 representatives on Occidental's board are also resigning. And, Joe, you remember this at the time. He didn't like the price that they were paying for Anadarko, didn't like what they were paying Warren Buffett for some of the stake to go ahead and finance that deal. So he had some big issues about it.
Under pressure in the early hour session, Matt. The likes of Marathon Oil, Occidental Petroleum down 6% and 5.4% respectively. So it looks like it will be another energy sector laggard kind of day. The other stocks you're seeing under pressure once again are Chinese ADRs. The likes of Alibaba. For some of the individual energy names moving to the upside, Occidental Petroleum is one of the outperformers. It's up around 2.5%. You also have the likes of Schlumberger and Exxon, each moving higher to the tune of 1.5%, Anna.
So that's the energy story. Here in Europe, then, let's check where we are on the European equity trading.
And this has been updated to include the Occidental Petroleum purchase on March 16th. However, in terms of today's headline, here on Monday, the Allegheny deal is not going to be included in here, I think namely because that's not going to even close until Q4 of 2022. And if we scroll down, we got this great little table I sorted by the percentage of portfolio. Very unlikely. Coca-Cola, Kraft, Occidental, I don't have any gas stocks. And then you got US Bancorp, Chevron. Some of these names, just for my personal preference of companies that I follow and typically invest in, there are several names on here that would be very unlikely that I would ever buy.
Occidental Petroleum here, it is now at another all-time high over here. I mean, I shouldn't say all-time high, post 2018 kind of high. And this, in my opinion, has a lot of retail momentum in it. In fact, it's not even just my opinion. I could tell you they are, yep, okay. So retail, trading flows, Alibaba, Neo, Occidental, XLE. You're actually seeing some expansion over, some buy the dip on Jets, which I'd be a little bit more careful about that one. One I do agree with personally would be like a Taiwan Semiconductors. Talked about.
Stocks that Chicago sold include ExxonMobil, Occidental Petroleum, Chevron, and Berkshire Hathaway. And joining us now to talk about all this is Melissa Conyers-Irvin, City Treasurer of Chicago, and it's great to have you on, Madam Treasurer. Is that good for you?
That sounds great to me.
Moving to the downside, that is weighing on energy names, including Occidental Petroleum, which is down by about 2.2%. Apple is down about 2% as well. Nikkei reporting overnight that it's cutting its production of the iPhone SE by 20% next quarter due to weaker demand. So that is dragging on those shares. And then finally,
as a result of this, ExxonMobil stock fell 3.4%, while Occidental Petroleum stock and Devon Energy stock both fell 4.1%.
put under pressure by some of the concerns around demand from China. Occidental Petroleum, one example, down about 2% before the bell, Anna.
Yeah, interesting. The energy stocks here in Europe are flat, Kaylee, but we do have...
Our next guest says oil prices could still go higher. Let's bring in Paul Sankey of Sankey Research. Paul, great to have you with us. BK says 150. You say 110 to 150. Structurally, that's where oil should go, you say. At what point do we hit demand destruction, especially as consumers...
strategic investments elsewhere. For example, we made a joint program with Occidental Petroleum in Texas in the Permian Basin. We are already producing 50,000 barrels of oil per day, and we can get up to 150,000 barrels of oil per day if we get further approval of the
major S&P indexes. In the S&P 500, it is Occidental Petroleum. It's up 104%. It is the only stock that has doubled this year. The S&P Midcap 400, it's EQT, the CEO of that company on this program a few times recently. EQT up 93%. But the best of the best is the S&P 600 small cap star RPC Inc. So
hours, especially those energy players, the likes of EQT and Occidental, which are, of course, both E&Ps. EQT down about 3.4%, Oxy down nearly 5 full percentage points before the bell, Anna.
Coming up.
With the deals he's done for additional shares of Occidental and HP Inc., and then buying Allegheny, the insurance company, outright for $11 billion. So we know he's started to spend some of that, deploy some of that. It'll be the first time people get to ask him about that, plus what's happening with the Fed, what's happening with the markets, what he sees in inflation. All of those things when Warren Buffett discusses two of the company's newest holdings, HP Inc. and Occidental. Berkshire revealing its stake in Occidental in March, thanks to reporting that we did about some of these things, and then the HP position earlier this month. Joining us right now for more on both of those holdings is Mark Cash. He's Morningstar equity analyst who covers shares of HP, and Stephen Richardson is ISI senior energy analyst covering Occidental. So, guys, let's walk through some of these things because these are some big bets, billions of dollars that they put down in each of these stocks. Stephen, first up, the best performing stock in the S&P 500 year to date is Occidental. It's been a huge performer, and a lot of that came after Buffett revealed his stake, but it's also just due to energy prices. What do you think about the stock right now?
I mean, I think it's, the context here that's really important is that Berkshire came in to fund capital in the areas that matter. Occidental has got a very interesting, chemicals business that's really in one of the more attractive parts of the chemical chain. Has a midstream business that positions it very well for a pickup of U.S. oil exports, is what we're seeing. And also a huge position in the Permian that Vicky,
I just wonder what you think about what he's doing lately. These moves into Occidental, into HP, the other things that we've seen, including the Allegheny purchase.
Yeah, those are right in his wheelhouse. I think the Occidental is maybe turning into more of a home run than what people think.
And then there's Berkshire's increased stake in Occidental Petroleum to 136.4 million shares, or 13% of shares outstanding. We're going to be catching up with Occidental CEO Vicky Hollop later today. We've spoken with her. She's here on the floor, and she's been kind of, he gave a big vote of confidence in her when he walked into this. He said he listened to the conference call and said she's running the company right.
Portfolio a lot more toward energy, right?
Yes.
With the Occidental stake increase.
Yes, it's very consistent with the Occidental bet, which he also added to recently. And earlier in the arena, I thought it was interesting that Buffett explained to shareholders how he was able to pick up 14% of Oxy in just 2 weeks. He actually said it was because of this speculative trading activity and this gambling mentality. So Oxy sold off a little.
Berkshire Hathaway, they've increased their stake in companies like HP and Occidental Petroleum, but most notably are the higher stakes in the energy company Chevron and the gaming company Activision Blizzard. Starting with Chevron, that stake now stands at just shy of $26 billion, a significant increase from less than $5 billion at the end of 2021. Activision...
Take a look at this one, though. Go ahead.
Yeah, we added Occidental Petroleum. It's one of 4 names that we increased in Joe T. Energy exposure now at 6.43% relative to 4.17% for the S&P 500.
Okay. I'm looking at Paramount, Jimmy. 52-week high, $47. It's at $30. And a lot of those stocks have sold off hard lately.
Yeah, we're going to have to see if
They also bought the dip quite a bit in Q1. big stake in Occidental Petroleum, Chevron. They increased their stakes in, and they bought multiple other stocks. And really, they're buying these as opposed to buying treasuries, which makes sense because I think treasuries are just getting reamed.
A little bit of additional shares into Occidental Petroleum Corporation. As we can see on the screen, this stock is up a staggering 100% year to date. Best performing company in the S&P 500. Another 6 million Occidental Petroleum shares. So Buffett again loaded up on Occidental Petroleum this week, purchasing 6 million shares for around $400 million or be pressured a little bit too. That just get a lot of free cash flows, which right now Chevron and Occidental not yet because they scraped entirely the dividend. They are building it back up right now.
But I also think you need to own some of these stocks like Occidental on the energy side because you're reversing 10-year plus downtrends in those names, Frank.
Okay, one last thing. We're going to have to let you go in a second. You believe that investors, they actually slept on Powell's statement that the Fed is not, quote unquote, actively considering that 75-point.
Straight A student. The market prefers C students like Occidental that are suddenly getting B pluses. All right, now, look out, John Oliver. It's time for my quarterly joke about how my wife loves Wendy's Baconator.
Is Activision, merger arbitrage, Chevron, Occidental, big bet on oil, and also Apple. Unfortunately, with Apple, he said in the meeting that the stock went up, so he stopped buying. 11 trading days, he bought 14% of Occidental, or 25% of the float, as 40% is owned and should be stable like index funds. Then there were also comments that God is just because this happened to Robinhood, to all the traders out there, and
that's better deals, right? So for example, when he bought Occidental, he actually got some options, right? So what he can do is he can execute options, I believe. I'm not quite 100% sure about the details, but he can execute options to buy the business at like $55 a share. So
Pete.
I'm going to stick with that Occidental trade that we saw, Scott. I think the energy space is continuing to go to the upside. This is a name that's going to fly.
Okay. Bryn, what do you have for us?
Yeah, JIGB. Long-duration corporates have had their worst sell-off since March of 2020. Prior to that, it was decades before. You get a 4% yield.
I just saw something that Warren Buffett is buying Occidental Petroleum. Do you really believe that gasoline and oil are a part of our future? Or do you believe that electric vehicles are going to place? Do you believe that I'm going to have a battery in my garage that is run off of solar power and I will not need fossil fuel to get away from fossil fuels? Why would you invest in Occidental Petroleum?
Also dominating the list of new 52-week highs, Occidental, Devon Energy, Chevron, Marathon Petroleum, to name a few. Let's bring in Paul Sankey, Sankey Research President, to break down the moves. Paul, good to have you with us. How are you seeing oil prices and how they play out for the year and maybe even into next year?
Well, it looks like today.
Like the top performing stocks right now, CF Industries, Occidental, Apache, Mosaic, so the commodity levered names. That's obviously how you're going to position in somewhat in terms of inflation. Do you want to be investing in those right now, or do you need to be buying the beaten up like Apples and Googles? Like they're not going to lose all their revenue or have that kind of risk like.
This month, Warren Buffett's firm boosted its stake in Occidental Petroleum by nearly 7 million shares. It's also been buying shares of HP, scooping up another 10 million shares of that company last month. And at the Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting a few weeks ago, Buffett said that his firm now owns 9.5% of Activision Blizzard, which would imply they've been.
Most of the largest capital stacks, you could think of companies like Occidental or Apache, will most likely migrate to investment grade within the next 12 to 18 months. So for the first time in a long time, high yield energy has actually been a meaningful tailwind for the asset class. But yeah, I mean, we still feel very constructive on the underlying oil and natural gas.
As we would have expected from Buffett. Also selling the Occidental shares he got as the preferred dividend immediately instead of holding for the long term, even if he knew he could save Occidental by himself if needed. So again, a big surprise, Verizon, he sold off the complete stake. So Verizon, the telecom, dividend, okay, there is high debt, but the price earnings ratio is low and the dividend yield is really high. After the last earnings, it has dropped a bit, now rebounded a bit, and the news is that
especially when you look at Chevron, ExxonMobil, Occidental, and their focus. Yeah. So I think it's important to not just, focus on one particular sector, though, because you see a tremendous amount of innovation, and that's really what's driving our pipeline, are all the different sectors.
Yeah. NuScale, small modular nuclear reactor company, Accelerate, actually floating LNG.
Apple, Tesla, Amazon, Nvidia, Microsoft, Twitter, Occidental, that's very Warren Buffett-esque. Bank of America, Coke, both of those also very Warren Buffett-esque.
A drop in markets this year, companies like Occidental up over what? 137%, BP 23%. And the list continues. The energy sector in the S&P up on the year as well. And so a new report today says that 8 oil and gas companies alone are involved in over 200 expansion projects over the next 3 years. What they say is the equivalent to the lifetime
in early hours here in the U.S., including Occidental Petroleum, up about 2.75% before the bell guy.
In my defense, I did see the original one at the cinema.
Fair enough.
There are a few people in this office that can say that. There are many that can't.
I did.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. I think Matt and I.
In early hours here in the U.S., that includes Occidental Petroleum and Marathon Oil, each up in the ballpark of about 2.5%.
Higher on the day, that of course is energy. We have Occidental Petroleum off of its highs actually, but still up nearly about 0.7%. ConocoPhillips up 1.6%. But
if you go across the street right now, you'll find that all the analysts are pricing $70 to $75 a barrel. Why? They're looking at the futures curve and they're just using that.
To retail stocks. This is when Warren Buffett really started getting into Occidental Petroleum. We see this big old spike right here in late March and a brief decline here where we started getting some outflows in oil. I think this is right when people started thinking, oh, that's it. This is peak oil. We made our money in oil. That's it. It's going back down.
They took Occidental, Continental and Marathon Petroleum on how much they spent on CapEx in 2014. It was 145 billion. Now it's only 26 billion, much less. And this is one of the reasons the price of oil is skyrocketing and is going to continue to go much higher. By the way, all these beautiful charts are from someone on Twitter.
50%, really doing quite remarkable here. Occidental Petroleum up 120%. Really quite a good year for them. Nonetheless, of course, super important to bear in mind that, in these times of uncertainty, we don't quite know what's going to happen. But I always say, just imagine the worst. What I would say is,
example, commodities, or even companies like Occidental Petroleum, which what's interesting here is over the last month, they're down 16.33%.
Specifically, and that is weighing on energy stocks this morning. Occidental Petroleum is down about 3.8%, and you have Exxon, the oil major, down about 3.5%, Anna.
Yeah, the rethink on commodities, the rethink on oil prices, the weakness there, Kaylee, certainly something we're featuring here on European stocks. European equity markets then down by 1.6%.
Production upstream names like EOG Resources, Occidental Petroleum, Hess, Diamondback Energy among some of the best performers in the S&P 500 energy sector. On the downside, though, check out what's happening with Lending Tree, not in the S&P, but the on.
And even though they don't own that one, they do own one, Occidental Petroleum Corporation, which we all know Warren Buffett bought all the shares he could. Even when the oil got down lower, he bought more as well. Buys more Occidental shares, raised his stake to about 16.4%. So a lot of people ask me, hey, you loaded up on different stocks. And yeah, I did this. I loaded this up, which was good, but I did it before I even had a chance to read this. The good news is that I believe, based on all the things I've talked about here, my own due diligence.
And the top stock in the S&P 500 is Occidental Petroleum. It has doubled in just 6 months. So congratulations to CEO Vicki Hollub and her investors, the only stock to double this year. So let's all say goodbye and good riddance to a first half of the year, and here's to a better second half of the year for all the stock market. Heck,
you look at Conoco, you look at some of the Occidental Petroleum. These guys are not only gushing revenues, they're gushing profits. We're talking about 100% increase in the profits of these oil companies compared to last year.
Trading though. And I do want to also highlight Occidental because we had some late news on Friday that Berkshire Hathaway has boosted its stakes in Occidental Petroleum. Traders seem to like that vote of confidence. Occidental Petroleum higher by 2.7%. And like Matt mentioned earlier, you do have Bitcoin slightly higher. That means Coinbase is higher as well. But remember, we got that huge downgrade from Goldman Sachs last week. Definitely the bloom coming off the rose when it comes to Coinbase. We'll see if it hangs on to those gains, Danny. 4% market.
7, 8 holdings are. I see a lot of commodity names. I see Occidental. I see Nucor. I also see the dollar, the U.S. dollar.
Yeah.
What's the rationale?
Well,
here? I can understand why commodities, because all the macro guys are really into commodities right now still. But what's the dollar?
Yeah. Well, the dollar really is
right about that.
Stephanie Lake, final trade.
Occidental Petroleum, it's down 25% since the beginning of June. It trades at 5.5 times earnings, 5.3 times EBITDA, and they're generating just last quarter alone over $3 billion in free cash flow. And Berkshire Hathaway now has an 18.7% position in the company.
I was waiting for you to get to the Berkshire part of that story. Amy Raskin.
Same with some of these other stocks, Occidental, APA, the old Apache, ConocoPhillips, the same story. The other major trend is, as Jim noted, pessimism amongst the analysts. I'm not trying to call it pessimism so much as getting real finally. So we're starting to see some downgrades ahead of earnings season. So Regions Financial today downgraded Citi, Gap, Wells Fargo downgraded.
As much as it's wonderful that companies like Occidental are taking extra income that they're able to receive from higher oil and gas prices, and they're taking this money to pay down their debt, which is what all companies should be doing, the days of expensive oil are gone. So while I think that we have maybe 1 or 2 quarters left of happiness, we're going to start seeing some pain at companies like Occidental Petroleum.
17.4% of Occidental Petroleum, or OXY for short, and they lifted their stake in the energy company to almost $10 billion, according to a filing on Friday, and we're in the long weekend right now. And so Warren Buffett now owns, or Berkshire Hathaway now owns, approximately 163.4 million shares. And you can see here that Buffett actually began buying Occidental earlier this year, and Barron's actually estimates that Berkshire's total cost basis for Oxy is around $53 per share, which means that because the share price has come up, as I believe that people are following Buffett into this name, and also he's taking the shares off the people who are less optimistic over the name, and so
that are out there. Occidental Petroleum, people that have run an efficient operation, or simply an ETF on gas. There are gas ETFs that are out there that you can purchase, limit your, put the small amount of capital at work that you want to put into the volatile commodity that natural gas is. And
most of these ESG funds, remarkably, include oil companies. So Occidental Petroleum shows up in a lot of ESG funds because it scores highest on certain metrics compared to other competitors in the energy space. I wonder if they score high enough to make a difference, or did S&P have a very valid point by excluding Tesla, for example?
By dissecting
reporting today, which is a big recent Warren Buffett play. He really, I think, played that well at the beginning of the year. It hasn't performed as spectacularly in just the last few weeks, although it has caught up with a broader market rally after a little bit of a setback. So it's not doing. Caesars Entertainment beating, waiting for Solar Edge, Occidental Petroleum, Starbucks, waiting for Starbucks, Occidental Petroleum. We saw Caesars gaining about 4% in the after hours here, waiting for Solar Edge. That could be a big mover. Waiting for PayPal, waiting for SoFi. That'll be a fun one too. And waiting for AMD. So we're whatever. This is a weird market. Waiting for Occidental Petroleum and PayPal. A lot of pressure coming in on both sides. Let's see how these things move. Occidental Petroleum down about 1%. Tesla sitting at about up 1%. Uber up 1% after its run.
OXY. Recently, Warren Buffett has been buying this stock hand over fist. He's built up nearly a 19% stake in the company, and a lot of analysts project that Warren Buffett will buy this company in totality at some point down the road. Now, in terms of the performance over at certainly doing it from a press release perspective. We're seeing Occidental Petroleum headlines come up on a regular basis. So he is doing some buying. But when you come over here to cash flows, you see for the first 6 months, we've got our purchase of equity securities. This is your Oxys, your Bank of Americas, your Apples. You see for the first 6 months, we spent $57 billion.
Mortgage rates increase because of Fed hikes. And I've included Occidental Petroleum here. Berkshire Hathaway are the largest shareholder in the energy giant, an astute choice when the company is the best performing stock in the S&P 500 in 2022.
All right, Bloomberg's Lara Wright, thank you so much. Now, let's get back to pre-market action here.
Use of capital here. Now, as for which stocks Berkshire went for, well, Occidental Petroleum continued to be one of them. We have seen that aggressive buying spree in the past, really raising questions as to whether Berkshire plans to buy that energy giant. But even a spree of this magnitude, well, it actually didn't really dent the cash pile at all. It actually came in at 105.
Many analysts do. I think there's better names out there, so Occidental is a sell for me as well.
Well, let's move on and see if our last name here can get you in a different kind of mood. It's let's see, it's Nucor, the steel maker. 5-point increase in profit margins over the past year. Quint, what do you do with that?
Okay, this checks all the boxes for me.
Correlated equities in particular, Occidental Petroleum, Devon, Marathon Oil, all down in the ballpark of 2.5% to 3%, and it's feeding through to the metals complex as well in material stocks like Freeport-McMoRan, which is down about 2.7% before the bell guy.
You got there first. We're seeing the same thing here in Europe, Kaylee.
European Union even. Verizon, I'm also rather muted on that. Occidental Petroleum, yeah, okay. Exxon, okay, these are obviously the oil plays. Now that oil is coming down again, I'm not sure about that. Very cyclical stuff. It's very, very much about timing. Usually we are not very good at timing. AMC, good God. And by the way, I joined an AMC Discord because
they added just a bit and they actually increased their holding in Occidental Petroleum. But we already knew this because they actually had to disclose these positions. And that being said, the biggest hike is actually in Ally Financial. Now this is interesting mainly because of two reasons. Firstly, when it comes to financial institutions, his timing is actually exceptional.
Likes how the CEO is running the company, and Occidental is one of the US majors that actually has a quite a strong low carbon story. Of course, the big story with Berkshire Hathaway has been the enormous amounts of cash that Buffett has got to put to work, and clearly he sees Occidental as a good place to put that cash at the moment. He first got involved in 2019 and has really been steadily increasing his exposure to Occidental since then.
Kevin, Eric, I just really want to talk to Kevin. Kevin, 50% of Occidental, is he going to buy the whole company at some point? Where does this end?
It's certainly on the table. I mean, he currently owns 20%, and this authorization from FERC gives him the option of buying up to 50% in the secondary market if he wants to. But we all know that.
Take a look at this. You want to have some easy money? Occidental. We have a little bit of this, and I have this over at the Patreon. We have a little bit in our portfolio. So if you want to join us over there, you can hit that down there in the Patreon link. Join our private Discord as well for all the Patreon members. But check this out, 10% up. We got the okay to buy up to half. Berkshire can acquire 50% of Occidental Petroleum. And I'm going to guess that's going to mean some very high buying from them if they do see the value in there. PE ratio of 7 right now. This is the absolute kind of stock I'm holding. I've been following along with this since 2019. And it's just interesting to me to watch, because everybody thinks that it's automatic gold once Warren Buffett touches it. $10 billion in Occidental Petroleum for Anadarko takeover. This article is not new. This is an older article. When, Mo? When is it? April 30th, 2019. I still remember when the announcements for Occidental, for Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway getting in there with Occidental Petroleum came out in the Anadarko takeover. Very interesting. All right.
And back to Berkshire and Occidental, I mean, one of the things that makes Oxy so attractive is they paid down an enormous amount of debt. This is a cash flow generative company. And M&A throughout the sector, I think, has just begun. And it's beginning because, again, companies are free cash flow positive. They're able to actually make
dollars a barrel once again. The likes of Occidental Petroleum up about 2.2% and Marathon Oil up about 1.5% as well. And I have to talk about the meme stocks, as I do pretty much every day now. Bed Bath & Beyond, of course, has seen a lot of action, a lot of volume and volatility. Lately, it has been more so to the downside, but this morning up nearly 16%.
Best S&P 500 stocks this year, Occidental Petroleum, up 159%. Warren Buffett owns like 20% of the company now. Hess Corp, John Hess & Co., up 71%. And Devon Energy, up 68% this year. But some random but other interesting winners this year, Consol Energy. They're up 229.
Opening a position in Exxon, Occidental Petroleum, or Kinder Morgan. And I was wondering what you'd recommend as the best play to get in on the liquefied natural gas trade.
Great question. Occidental up too much because Warren Buffett keeps buying it. Exxon's already had a big move. Thank you, David Faber. That leaves me with Kinder Morgan because I do believe in pipelines, and a lot of guys have downgraded. I think that's a mistake. Let's go to William in Michigan. William.
Hi, Jim. Thank you for taking my call.
America, Coca-Cola, Chevron. Yeah, so a bunch of boomer stocks and Occidental Petroleum, which I'm speculating he's most likely going to buy it outright, which he's done in the past. Wouldn't be surprised at all. He also owns like Paramount Global, which is also an underrated option as well.
But they're holding pricing, high pricing, even given inflation. Occidental Petroleum up with oil higher, sharply higher, up about 1.3%. But of course, also on the news or the known news that Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway has a 20.2% stake and also has the ability to take that as high as 50%. Bristol Myers Squibb up 7.4%. Their oral psoriasis drug was
lately, and since he owns 20% of Occidental Petroleum, and he's just asked to buy another 30% of it, wouldn't that be a nice horse to ride, OXY?
Well, I'll tell you, it would be, but it is the stock that's up the most in the last year. And I think that even though I think Warren Buffett is terrific, I cannot recommend you the stock that's been up the most in the last year. It's just not right. Bob and
In the energy sector, names like Marathon Oil, Occidental Petroleum, each up the better part of 2% before the bell. And also you're seeing defense stocks getting a boost here after some of that more aggressive rhetoric from Putin talking about any means necessary. Once again, we're weighing the potential of any kind of nuclear weapon possibly being used. And as a result, the
Well, let's see back here you are. But, Occidental is a very inexpensive stock, and I believe in the oils. We're overweight in the oils for when it comes to my Chapel Trust, so I'm going to say you can stick with Occidental, and welcome back to the air. I need to go to Josh in North Carolina. Josh.
Kramer, my man.
Hey, man. What's going on, Josh?
To speak with you, brother. Hey, roughly a month and a half ago, SoFi.
A lot of those energy players seeing some weakness today as well. Occidental Petroleum down 1.8% or so, as is Devon Energy. So a lot of weakness you were seeing in the energy and materials sectors this morning, Anna.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's reflected here in Europe, Kaylee. For much of this morning, we've seen weakness in energy names, basic resources. Overall, the stocks.
That's sketchy. ExxonMobil, 5.3%. Occidental Petroleum, 5%. Stocks have gotten absolutely obliterated. And they've been obliterated basically since June. If you pull up a chart on any of these stocks, they've been absolutely wrecked. And,
My favorites. And of course, you can see in here, they actually, Occidental, which we know Buffett's big winner. So they got some really nice stocks in here. Here we can see here, you got the three companies that make up the top, I'd say 44% of the holdings for this ETF. And it gives you that chance to get away from the business risk where you can.
Oil prices down, as Matt was talking about. The likes of Marathon Oil, Occidental Petroleum, each down in the ballpark of about 2.5%. But of course,
take a gander at the chart of Warren Buffett favorite, Occidental Petroleum. Oxy for short has become a lot more attractive now that OPEC's actively moving to prop up oil prices. Broden points out that Occidental recently made a low at a key symmetry support level. The concept of symmetry is a little weird, and a given stock moves in a single direction are often very similar. You know that it tends to be surprisingly reliable. With Occidental, the stock had a $19.74 decline back in May and in June, okay? Then it had another decline from late August to September that took it down $19.70. A sustainable bottom. Doesn't hurt that Occidental's lows overlap with two other Fibonacci price retracements that give it a nice floor in the high 50s. Fulfilled. However, she does expect Occidental to bounce. As long as last month's lows hold, she could see Oxy running all the way to $82 or even $89. On the other hand, if that late September low at 57 is violated, she says you need to throw in the towel. Now, finally, let's talk about something that's really kind of intriguing to me. The broader market, the S&P 500. Right now, as interpreted by Carolyn Baroden, suggested Twitter, Valero, and Occidental Pete could have some upside here. I'm more cautious on Twitter because it's an arbitrage play. But the other two have my attention, and wouldn't it be something if the S&P actually caught a bottom here? Let's go to Cush in my home state of New Jersey. Cush. Twitter, Valero, and Occidental Pete could have some nice upside here. I'm more cautious on Twitter, but the others, they've sure got my attention. Much more made money on, including CBC's Julia Borson. She's out with a new book, When Women Lead. And I'm finding out more about what she learned and why it's so important more than ever. Then, something rational.
Oil prices down, as Matt was talking about. The likes of Marathon Oil, Occidental Petroleum, each down in the ballpark of about 2.5%. But of course, the sector that we all really have been focused on in the last several days is the semiconductors. A number of factors here, one being the Biden administration curbs on U.S. technology to Chinese chip makers, so that could...
The energy, boy, oh boy, oh boy. And they do add some Oxy on there, Occidental Petroleum. You can see everything they owned and everything else. And you can do this for a lot. You can go in there and search a ton. You could search them all right here. All right.
In the post market, we have Affirm, AMC Entertainment, Occidental Petroleum, Upstart, and Walt Disney.
They were a net buyer stocks. We know that they added stake to Occidental Petroleum.
And looking at the worst performers, Walt Disney, Occidental Petroleum, Norwegian Cruise Line, Bath & Body Works, and Tesla. And Tesla hit a new 52-week low.
For example, the big banking names buy some Jeffries. And then Occidental has been one of his biggest trades all year. We know that. So we have to kind of keep an eye on where people are buying idiosyncratic names. The Tiger Cubs, Co2, Tiger Global, they're important to look at because they are really identifying with a lot of the funds that have lost a lot of money this year, guys.
On average, value would be like your BPs, your Dow Chemicals, your Occidental companies, right? Those are your values right now. Whereas companies like growth are going to be your Amazons, your Google, your Facebook, Microsoft, Nvidia, AMD, right? Those obviously are suffering. And we expect EPS declines across the board at all of those companies except Tesla.
Adds a bit more Chevron, upped his stake 23% on Occidental, and decreased his Activision bet by 12%. Remember his...
That includes me, okay? But yeah, Chevron, Occidental, they're still adding onto these oil companies. Man, that's bad news for like most people. That means like they really truly do believe that oil prices are probably going to go back to all-time highs, or they think that they're still very discounted heavily against the markets.